It's been more or less 30 years ago when I first heard about a fellow who was doing radio and TV. He was bombastic, he was opinionated, and his name was Rush Limbaugh. I resonated with a lot of what I heard out of Mr. Limbaugh, but I came to a startling conclusion when I was discussing him with another individual who was in my family, and it was that oftentimes Mr. Limbaugh would be right for the wrong reasons or would have the wrong answer that he got out of what seemed to be proper and consistent facts. Well, he's not the only person that I know who I have that problem with. Another example would be a fellow by the name of Dinesh D'Souza that periodically I listen to and I go, no, Dinesh, you're missing this, you're missing that. Now, that doesn't mean that Dinesh gets it wrong per se. It just means that sometimes he does, right? But sometimes he leaves sort of gaping holes in what he talks about. And I wanted to talk about one today on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and today is Sunday, the 10th of April of 2022. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on my Facebook page, the Kurt's Religion and Politics page there, on locals.com, that's Kurt's Religion and Politics.locals.com, on minds.com, minds.com, the Kurt's Religion and Politics group there on Parler, Gab, Twitter, wherever you happen to be catching me. And the thing that I was looking at that Dinesh was talking about was the subject of essentially being a daddy. So that's what I chose as my subject for today. I'm going to go ahead and go through my notes real quick, and we're going to kind of talk this through, and then I'm going to go through and kind of elaborate on what I say in my notes. Is being a daddy just about things like justice when your children misbehave, as opposed to moms who are more likely to defend the child from potentially having done wrong? Is that what you're looking at, justice? Truth is, daddies realize something else that's maybe even more important. We want our children to become productive, reasonable, rational members of society. If we let them slide when they do wrong without challenging them, are we more or far less likely to accomplish that? I would say far less, in case you're wondering. And I say that here, I think. In my opinion, I know my opinion. I'm not against the idea of being objective as a primary one. I'm fine with not assuming your children are sunshine and roses, that they too can and will do things wrong. That's obvious, right? And I'll be the first to say I'm willing to look stupid, foolish, or frankly, whatever for my children. So I don't mind if it ends up being me that looks bad instead of my child, which is part of what I'm getting across here. I've seen pictures of dads with hair braids in and various things that their little girls put in their hair, and that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about as well. That's at least partly because I believe it will make them better people. Is sacrificing for your children a very real probability? I've had to do that for every one of my children in a variety of ways. I'm not saying any of the sacrifices were terribly hard. I'm sure there are parents who've had to do a great deal more than I have, and I'm not trying to lift myself up in that regard. I'm just trying to say that that's something that I think parents do. Even parents who are in fairly easy circumstances will sacrifice for their children in order to make it so that their children have a better life. I'm not looking for pity or even sympathy where that's concerned either. That's just not a thing for me. It's just reality. It's just what it is. That said, probably the absolute most important part of my job as a daddy is to raise children who will not only love justice, but be genuinely good people. And I said something on my first take of this video that I realize I haven't included yet probably, and it is mamas tend to be more interested in having their kids be good people than dads even do. They just have a different way of dealing with that. If I let them get away with my children wrongdoing, you can pretty much bet that's going to be at least a questionable outcome that we're going to get from it. Don't get me wrong, sometimes you have to bite the bullet for your kids and fix things for them. It's hoped the older they get, the less that should be the case, though sometimes even parents of grown children must do such things, and will. Many of us readily. But the main thing I want to make clear in this podcast is absolutely nobody spends as much time with their children than their parents. As their parents, whatever you want to say there, if their parents are doing as they ought. Regardless that, honestly, it should be, quote, a thing, end of quote, that they work to be the best possible, most honorable and righteous folks their children know. And that's not so they can have someone to tell the world how great they were when they're gone, but to be the strongest possible role model for their young. Are you a parent? Is this how you do business? If not, maybe it's time to start thinking about what I'm saying and deciding who you will be to your little ones, because maybe you're not doing that like you need to. Dinesh was, in the thing that he spent his time talking about, interested in the idea that men, daddies, tend to be more interested in righteousness than just about anything else, about the right outcome, if you will. But what I need for you to understand is this. My job as a daddy is to raise children into adulthood. I've even said it this way. I've said, you're not raising children, you are raising adults. That's what you're doing as a parent. You're not raising somebody who they're a child for a time, I grant you that, but that's not who they end up being. So my job as an adult, as the parent, as the daddy in particular, is to make sure that I'm raising good people, genuinely good people. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I've seen people who you would swear did everything right, and their child ended up being going to jail for real reasons, meaningful reasons, not just because, there was a mistaken identity or something like that. I literally have a brother who fell in with some people that he really probably shouldn't have been involved in. In fact, I have a couple of them. Now they made their way out of that phase, but the fact is, my dad would never have expected to see that of his children, and I'm sure that it was shattering and shocking to him that it occurred. Not that he probably would have ever expressed it in that way, and maybe he had the wisdom to realize, that's something that may happen regardless whatever else I do. But the point that I'm making is very, very, very simple today. Look, you as a parent, and particularly as a daddy, your primary interest with your children should be to ensure that they end up being people who will be beneficial, useful, worthwhile to the world. That's not to say that that's always going to happen, as I say, but nonetheless, that's what you should be aiming to do. Now, in Dinesh's defense, the idea of righteousness, of being right, of doing well, and so forth, that should be the basis for that. But how you get that across to your children and how you deal with your children where things like that are concerned may not be entirely as you expect them to be. When my youngest child was born, I said to the next youngest, I said, you're gonna maybe feel a little cheated. I'm just gonna tell you, because I'm going to do things differently with this child than I did with you. And this was after we realized that he was autistic. Somewhat, though some of it was just sort of a suspicion on my part of where things were heading, right? And I handled how I dealt with him totally differently. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I'm not a total failure where my kids are concerned, but I did not do them like I should have done them in every circumstance. I will admit to my failings, to many failings. I probably don't even know all of the failings that I have. But my interest has always been in one simple thing: raising people who would be a benefit, a boon to society. And that's what I'm trying to do these days. And what I have been trying to do for some time. So the thing that I would say to somebody like Dinesh is, you're right. The righteous outcome for something is reasonable, and it's something that you should be searching for. But the question is why? And the underlying question to that for me is because you should be seeking to raise people other folks will look at and go, wow, that's a really great person. Right? This is who you should be seeking to raise. It's not easy. It's not always fun. You end up sacrificing. You end up doing things for your children you never thought you would do in your entire life. But it's always worth it if you do it right. And I'm going to tell you something. For those of you who are parents who tried very hard to raise good kids and your kids did not end up being the kind of people that you wanted them to be, but you did everything that you could to do that, I hope you sleep well at night, because you should. You did the work, you tried to do what you needed to do, and it ended up how it ended up. Okay, I need to go ahead and wrap things up. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and today is Sunday the 10th of April of 2022. That means tomorrow will be, oh, by the way, it's the beginning of the Christian week for most Christian folk. That means tomorrow will be Monday the 11th of April of 2022. That will be the beginning of the work week for a lot of folks. Thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on my Facebook page. That would be the Kurt's Religion and Politics page there. As well as on kurtzreligionandpolitics.locals.com, minds.com, and potentially Parler, Gab, or Twitter, or anywhere else you might happen to be catching me as well. Subject for today has been being daddy. And by the way, in case you've heard my son a little bit in the background, though he's been fairly quiet today, that's part of being daddy, and you're just going to have to live with that until I can find a better way to do my recordings, my videos, and my audio. But in the meantime, you're going to have to deal with it. Tomorrow's subject, though, is going to be, are they able? And this is kind of an interesting subject that came to me sometime in the past when I realized that there were people being put into positions for which they really weren't qualified. And you're going to find some of the reasons that I count for qualification kind of interesting. In fact, I don't count a lot of the ones that a lot of people use. I have others that I consider more important. In any case, hope that you're doing well today. Hope everything is going well for you, and hopefully we will see you again on Monday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This podcast was created on Sunday, the 10th of April of 2022. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching today's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. Don't forget to come back tomorrow to check out the next one. Remember, on various platforms, primarily Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, and CloudHub, and the audio podcast, you can subscribe to my content. For the audio podcast, you probably want to use Apple, Google, or Spotify. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. In order to find me on those platforms, you can go to the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, and CloudHub. You can also get to my content on Facebook by finding the Kurt's Religion and Politics page there. minds.com, where you will find me at the Kurt's Religion and Politics group. And Kurt's Religion and Politics.locals.com as well. You can look there. I post my daily video on various social media sites, really only about 3, Parler, Gab, and Twitter at present. I am at KP Schubert on each of them, and you can find me under them, and you can find the videos under me. You should be able to find my podcasts on Google and Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's also on podcasts.kpschubert.com. That's podcasts with an S. .kpschubert.com. If you're looking for me on various of the podcast sites, you probably want to search Kurt's Religion and Politics, not the Daily Summation. Keep in mind you can subscribe to my content on various places that I put it. All constructive feedback is welcome. You can like, dislike, add a rumble, or give whatever feedback is available on any of the platforms that you can do such things. You can also add a comment on what I put there. Unless you're advertising or doing something that I believe will harm others, I'll leave your comments out there even if I don't agree with or understand them. I will try to let you know I've seen them when possible and may reply if I feel it's reasonable, appropriate, and possible, of course. Thanks again for viewing this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. Don't forget to come back again for tomorrow's as well.